Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you need translation services, we do have 9 languages available for you. So you can click on the globe icon that says interpretation, select your language, and then we recommend that you mute the original audio so that you don't hear both languages, English and your selected language, unless you want to. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then I will switch over to our presentation. Stop share.
Do you want to redo that, Gil? Just since we now at 120, you started when you started there was 30 people.
Okay.
They were gradually coming in, so just
yeah. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm showing here on my screen, if you need translation services, we do have 9 languages available that are being translated tonight. Click on the interpretation logo, the world icon that should be on the bottom of your screen. You can then select the language, and then we also recommend that you mute the original audio so that you're not hearing both English and your selected language coming through at the same time, unless that's what you would like. I think we have, as the number settled in, Dr. Stowe, don't see my screen. We have about 140 participants tonight.
all right. Do you want to go to the next slide then?
Let me, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Good to go.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Stowe. I'm the interim superintendent, and so thankful for you to be here tonight and learn a little bit more about what we're going to be offering next year, and also want to thank our translators for really providing great service to you and those of you that need it in your primary language, because we know this is a very important decision for you and your family, and we want to make sure that that you get all the questions answered that you were hoping to tonight. So if we go to the next slide, just it's a brief introduction or agenda for tonight. We'll do an introduction and kind of go over why are we here, what's the meeting about. Then Dr. Crumpy is going to take you through the different virtual models that we're going to be offering, and then an opportunity for you to learn more about the program and have questions and answers. Next slide. So we are expecting, and as all of the districts, actually many across the country, most across the country, are talking about the full return of school, students to school next year. We believe that students learn best when they are in school, in person, with highly qualified teachers, near their peers, and have access to counselors and administrators and other resources at the school site. But that being said, we also know that there may be some families that do not want their student to return in person for various reasons. I do want to say that this past year, we know of no cases where COVID was transmitted in school. We had our schools open for students in-person learning for some of our special education students, as well as our high school athletic programs since late September, early October. And then in December, we returned our TK and K students. January, first grade, and second, third, and fourth here, and well, all other grades February through March. And so we had more students on campus than any other district in the county of Los Angeles. And even at the peak of the pandemic, we followed the protocols and students were safe. And so that's a testament to all of the work that our staff did, and that the students and families, to make sure that they took care of precautions at home and followed the protocols. So I say that because we want to encourage families to be back in person. We think that is best, and we will provide a safe learning environment for you. So school starts on August 26, 2001. So that's a Thursday in August, and we have made some changes. We have reduced the number of students in classes to create additional spacing in those rooms to provide for distance that may be required. We also have purchased over 5,000 individual student desks to be able to make that happen. And we will follow the Department of Public Health guidelines. And so that may mean masks. We're not sure. We don't know what the guidelines will be in late August, but we will be having that conversation. We will follow the distancing and possible screening as students come onto campus, but obviously also health protocols, washing hands, and making sure that there's sanitizing stations on our campus so that students feel safe. Now, here's a picture of one of the classrooms that we've set up. You see a number of tables off to the side. Those would be removed. But these are the kinds of desks and environment where we expect students to return to in the fall. Again, we are in the process of hiring almost 75 additional teachers to be able to have classes that are a little bit smaller, to be able to account for more distance in the rooms, as well as to provide interventions and support to our students that we know may need it. So now I'm going to turn it over to, before I do, the program that we are talking about an independent study program. At this point in time, the state is not planning. Well, at this point in time, there is no distance learning program allowed by the state past June 30th. So the program that your students may have experienced this year is going to look very different next year. And depending on whether or not the state passes new law to allow school districts to have true distance learning programs as we've had in the past, 12 or 14 months. That being said, we are under our independent study guidelines, which again also are our state laws. We would be following where you could learn from home, learn independently, not be physically on campus, but we want to make sure you're not expecting the same exact program as students received this year. And so that's kind of the meeting tonight, to talk about the differences and what that program may look like. So with that, I will turn it over to our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Katie Crumpy, who's going to go into a little more detail and facilitate the meeting tonight. So Dr. Crumpy.
Thank you, Dr. Stowe. So one of the first things that we want to talk to you about is really having you think about what's best for your student. Embarking on this venture last March, when we had to immediately close schools and figure out what to do and have your children learn from home, we were able to capitalize on a lot of what our students told us was working, a lot of what our teachers found that worked, and we really utilized that to put a plan in place for this current school year, 2020-2021. Now that we've finished an entire school year with approximately 30% of our students learning from home for the entire school year, we've actually learned even more about, and we really want you to strongly consider the following when you decide whether to stay virtual for the entirety of the next school year or not. And one of them is to really consider how independent your student is. Are they an independent learner? Do they learn on their own organizationally? Can make lists, follow assignments that need to be turned in, and really can kind of set a schedule and stick with it. Do you have a consistent learning environment at home? We found that the student that had that place that was quiet, that they knew that was school, versus being in their bedroom with other distractions, video games being one of them. But do they have that consistent learning environment for success? I think one of the strongest things is to look at this year. How did your child perform virtually during the school year? And not just considering academically. We know people have worked very hard to make sure that your children had exposure and were achieving all of the standards, but also social emotionally. How are they doing? How is their well-being? How much interaction do they have or can they have, with people their own age? And really one of the best things to do is to talk with your teacher. Your child's teacher will have a really good sense of how they're doing or whether this was a struggle this year. How is technology and connectivity a challenge? And because it really stresses children out when they lose their connection, and then by the time they've come in and then they're back in their Zoom room or their Google Meets room, and they've missed chunks of the directions and they have to kind of catch up. And so how is your connectivity at your home? And is there available adult support, especially with our youngest kids? Is there someone there that can help with the technology then when it becomes a challenge? Who do they go to when there's a question? And what is that consistency of that support? So these are just some of the things that we really want you to consider as you're making this decision for next year. Gil, next slide. There also will be, it's still in development, some sort of a contract, a parent, student, teacher compact, if you will. This program is for the entire school year. So you would be agreeing if you go in and you accept distance learning, that you realize this is for all of next school year. Consistent attendance is important, and as is completing all assignments and work. This is actually part of the state independent study requirement to participate in this program. Now, assuming we may have a few brand new parents here of kindergartners who did not experience our platform this year. But those of you that have been part of it know that every week there's a notebook that is submitted for elementary school that works, that completion of that notebook being turned in will suffice as the state requirement as we know it. And so that is the expectation, that work is done, and that there has to be active engagement. Whether that means their camera is on and they're following what the teacher is doing. We had a lot of reports by parents and by teachers that they knew, and trust me, they're better than we are. I was in a waiting room just last week, and there was a Torrance family in the waiting room, and the boy that was coming with his mom had our Chromebook, and the number of tabs open and the quickness of how he went back and forth. I was dizzy of back and forth in between programs and a game and then back to an assignment. He wasn't in school. It was his homework he was doing, but can they actively be engaged in school? We often have to try to get a hold of a parent during the day and get them to come out of where they're working or whoever's taking care of them, because the children are playing video games and are not paying attention. So that's going to be a requirement of this program, that they are actively engaged. As I talked about completing the assignments, work completed is a requirement. It's not, the assignments are not optional. And there is going to be a requirement. There will be some in-person attendance necessary for assessments. And so you need to know that up front as well. Of course, if there is some sort of a documented health need that we need to, keep you safe and have you be in a different area, but there will be some assessments. And quite honestly, we had a meeting last week where we had a lot of our teachers talking about what worked, what didn't work. One of their strongest concerns was parents doing the work at home for their kids. And so there will be some times where they have to come and they're there, doing some of the assessments. And you also will be agreeing that you understand that if these things are not upheld, that your child will be, returned to school. So that's the less fun stuff, but it's needed and necessary. And it's actually a required component of independent study. And again, if you're coming in, you're probably going to hear us repeat a couple of times. We actually have no permissibility after June 30th to have a virtual academy. It has to be under the education code, the laws that govern us for independent study. And I'm gonna, and so this contract is actually a required component of independent study. Next slide, Gil. So now for the elementary school, the option is that we are going to do, it is going to be offered, we think, depending on the numbers, at 2 sites. So you will not be enrolled in your home school. You will be, we call it a boundary waiver. So you don't have to get a permit, you don't have to do anything, but we will, with permissibility, you will be assigned to, we believe, unless the numbers are even smaller than we think, we may do it only at 1 school, but we believe that there will be a school in the central and south part of town and in the northwest part of town. So again, you will not be in your home school. You will be assigned to one of these 2 sites for next school year with full return rights the following year. So I want to be clear. You absolutely return to your site the following year. Don't need to do anything. And you're back at your home site. Now in future years, that may not be the case, but for next year, that is. And we do this, it is going to allow us to consolidate the resources. And for some of our families, because we're going to talk about the different kinds of distance or virtual learning in a second, this will allow some in-person work where then there will be intervention support for you, counseling, mental health supports, but also enrichment participation. If you want to come for music or art or assemblies or field trips, there we'll be able to coordinate those services at those school sites, so that you have access to all of these supports. Next slide, Gil. And so there are 2 options. Now I want to be clear, if you're going into Power School and you're going to select distance learning, there aren't options. There aren't different options. It's you're going in and you're selecting distance learning. But there are 2 parts of this that you can select. One of them, we call it HBIS, or Home-Based Independent Study. We had this for the first time this year. Some people, this is called AKA homeschooling. And this is one additional step. If you're interested in this, you have to have a conversation with your principal at your site, because it does require that your student is at or above grade level for participation in this. And this is, the parent is the learning coach. The teacher provides an hour of weekly guidance to the parent. Why some parents picked this year is that it gave a lot of flexibility for when your child had to do the schoolwork. Pending legislative action, we do believe, because we developed this distance learning platform last year, we already have an independent study elementary platform designed for every single grade level, TK to grade 5. So that would be the platform that we use, just like this year, and that we would then provide some teacher daily synchronous instruction. How much we are, we would like for it to look something similar to this year. It all depends on the legislative action that we receive. And sometimes that's not a quick process for families that, if you choose this option and there's a drastic change, we will notify you and have a discussion with you. But we've been staying very on top of this, and we do believe that this will be permissible because of the distance learning platform that we've created. Students will attend school daily from 9 to 3, but it will be synchronous and asynchronous. Next slide, Gil. I want to go back to the HBIS, or this home-based independent study, just for a second. If you are interested in this, there are additional agreements. We had it was in its first year, but we had a few snafus this year. I think parents so struggled when school was closed and we had to do everything virtual, and then trying to keep their work schedules, their lives, their other children, and then having kids log on and off. I think right away at the beginning of the year, that was hugely stressful. And parents went to this model because they heard from other parents, you just do it all on your own whenever you want to do it, which is true, except there was a big misunderstanding with a few parents that then you are your child's teacher. That our teachers support you as the parent. They're not there to teach your children. And so there's an additional agreement there that you understand that ahead of time. There is a requirement by law that you meet with the teacher once a week. We provide an hour. If you don't need an hour, it can be shorter, but there is a requirement that you have to have a meeting with the teacher once a week. It allows them to go over and kind of foreshadow what curriculum is going to, what you're going to see and support your child with. It also, the teacher will be reviewing with you the work completion and be able to talk to you about strengths and gaps and how to help that. So that is a requirement. And there's an agreement that you understand the time commitment in order to support your child as the learning coach, because you really are their teacher. And so for a lot of families, they love this. It allows them to supplement with other, other learning that they choose, and it works well. And that's why we want to continue it with families. Just want to make it. Our teachers that did this wanted me to please make this clear, because it created a few hurt feelings when we had to pull contracts or and remove some students from this program. We don't want to have to do that. Next slide, Gil. And skip that one, because that's the next meeting. And so really, and I know this was short because, but we hope to provide, because this is a meeting from 5 to 6 o'clock. And so I've met my goal. I wanted to make sure that we were done in at least half the amount of time so that we can open this up to questions that you have and be able to answer, as many questions as we can in the next 30 minutes so that you can make a decision. And so Dr. Kim is going to help me. I know I received an email from somebody who asked a question that wasn't going to be able to come in tonight and has somebody else listening for them. And so I want to start as Dr. Kim, as he prepares to start asking me questions. Someone said, okay, I went in right away when I got this, and I clicked I've already signed up for distance learning. I've changed my mind. And I want my kids to return to school. What do I do? And just let us know. You can let your child's principal know, but you can email us at the district. And I think we've already had 9 or 10 families that have asked us to reverse that. So we can reverse that for you if you went in either mistakenly or you've changed your mind. So that's the first question that I was asked to respond to this evening. Dr. Kim?
Thank you, Dr. Krempe. So I'll be asking questions and Dr. Krempe will be answering. The first question is, will there be AMPM cohorts in the 2021-22 school year?
Yeah, good question. No. So the AM, PM, or AB cohorts are gone. That was something that we created for the students who were returning to school because we had to have a maximum class size of, well, 16 or 6 feet apart at the time. And our teachers and board direction was that students needed to be in school every day versus every other day. And so there won't be a need for that. This distance learning program will be, your child will need to be accessible to the teacher from 9 to 3 for the entire day. I'm sure once you meet the teacher and they meet you, that there will be a schedule, that will allow them time to do their asynchronous work as well. But children who return to school next year in person will also be in school every day, 5 days a week, 9 to 3. Similar bell schedule at your child's school that they had before the pandemic.
All right, our next couple of questions, I think you kind of just answered. They involve, what's the school schedule like? What is the TK schedule? Yeah,
TK schedule is similar to the rest of the school schedule, except they just go to school a tiny bit less every day. But the schedule for everyone returning to school is the same. For distance learning, and I'm happy to have additional conversations with you. We are strongly recommending that our TK K1 families return to school and do not consider distance learning as an option. Our littles, as we call them, just can't learn the important things via a Zoom computer screen. As Dr. Stowe mentioned, we do believe that we want our kids all back in school, but our littles, they need that tactile, learning how to turn a page in a book, learning how to hold a pencil. The teachers can't see if they're using the pencil and you're even holding it right, let alone forming letters. All of these very important skills are very, very, very difficult to do via not impossible, but very difficult. So we strongly recommend that if you have a little, the TK-K1 student, that you really think twice before placing them in distance learning.
Our next question is, will there be any hybrid learning, meaning both online, in person at the same time?
Good question. No. We also we've called that concurrent. And at the elementary level, we didn't do that this year either, except in a couple of situations where the teacher had to quarantine and we didn't want to send students home. And so we had a substitute teacher in the class with the kids, and then the teacher zoomed in from home to be able to provide that learning continuity. So no, and so I'm thinking that this parent may also have an older child that had some concurrent instruction. We're not planning on doing that next year. So you return your child to school, they will have the attention of the teacher for the entirety of the day. And likewise, if you were choosing distance learning, that teacher will be focused on just the kids who are distance learning.
Next question. What is the in-person anticipated class size for elementary classes?
So we anticipate that class size being around 26. We actually can, and our allocation is at 26:1 with no more than 27. You may think that sounds a lot like what our normal year is. And it's true, except we do this as an average. And so we allocate to our schools 27, or a teacher for every 27 students. But it's possible that a third grade might have 24 students. Well, that might mean that a third grade might have 30 students. And so, so again, an allocation, how many teachers we give, is very different from the maximum amount of students in a classroom. So for next year, we're allocating less. So they're giving the schools more teachers so that there will not be a class over 26 or 27 students in a room. That picture that you saw had actually 30 desks in the classroom, but we're going to 26 or 27 in elementary school because we know that we want a kidney table. You know, in elementary school, there are some other pieces of furniture that take up space that a middle or a high school campus don't have. You know, a little classroom library or a kidney table for guided reading, you know, are not in an 8th grade, you know, math class. So we anticipate most of them being at 26.
Next question. Can we opt into the virtual mode to start and then switch to in-person school later in the school year?
Yes, great question. Easy answer, no. Moving children back and forth is hugely disruptive. It was the biggest issue we had in learning continuity with children this year. Getting to the connection kids make with the teacher, and learning where they are, and then moving them to other teachers, and then having that teacher get to know who they are, and it is very unsettling. And we do it only in and we did it way too much this year because every time we turn, I mean, the rules kept changing, right? We knew we had this unusual pandemic year. So next year, and that's why in the FAQ and in the letter that you received from Dr. Stowe last Tuesday, you are making this decision for the entirety of next school year. So if you choose distance learning, that's where your child will be with their assigned teacher.
Next question. Would both virtual options be using the distance learning platform like the student planners work during the year?
So that's a great question. And the answer is not sure. The distance learning teachers will be using the platform for sure. But one of the things that we're hearing from our teachers this year is that they've learned a lot too. They've had phenomenal examples. And Dr. Heinrich is in this call and in this room right now, and she's hugely responsible for this, along with our resource teacher, that the assignments were at the right rigor level and they covered all the standards. I actually heard a teacher say, I can't believe it. It's the end of May and we've actually taught everything that we needed to teach. And she said, in all my years, I forget how many years she said I've never gotten there before. And so we do anticipate that our teachers who are returning to the classroom are not going to be required to use the distance learning platform. Do not expect that kids are going to come to school next year and open a laptop and be doing work. Absolutely not. Kids are going to learn in person. Are there times where we also don't want to lose their technological expertise. And there may be cases that when they absolutely use the learning platform, but they aren't going to be learning with a teacher with a laptop, with kids with a laptop doing a lot of work. I think a more reasonable thought is that teachers have really found what the right flow of instruction. They've seen somebody else do it and they've been open to a different way, a different order, and they may use some of these assignments, but they're going to use, one of the things we heard from them is they can't wait to let kids touch their work again and be able to edit writing again And not that they can't do it on a computer, but it's just very different in the brain and the thought process when you have them writing out their work, and then you have them go back and cross out and are making their edits. It's very different the way the brain develops and how they do that than when they can simply, delete and start over on in a Word document. So I hope I answered that question right. I think they will absolutely use pieces of it that they found to be the most useful, but they will not be using it instructionally in place of them teaching the class.
Next question. Will students be required to wear face masks when they are in person at school?
Yeah, another really good question. And to be honest, we just don't know yet. We await guidance from the LA County Department of Public Health. And so we don't know. At this time, if I had to answer the question today, like we're starting summer school on June 21st, and children will be wearing masks. Whether they give us guidance on or around June 15th, where then they don't have to wear them outdoors, but they have to wear them indoors, we just don't know. And so this isn't something that's a Torrance Unified School District rule. This is something that will come to us from the California Department of Public Health. At this time, Los Angeles has indicated that they will accept the California Department of Public Health guidance and not create restrictions. But if they want to wear a mask, they certainly can wear a mask, even if it would be optional. So if you feel more comfortable sending your child back to school wearing a mask, even if we're not required, they can still wear a mask to school.
Next question. Will students, parents, and staff be required to get COVID tested every week?
So we do not anticipate that. We haven't had to do that even now. We don't have COVID testing in regular classroom situations where we're abiding by Department of Public Health guidance. Where we did have to have testing was when they were making very, very close contact. Our football team, our basketball teams, I think water polo, but again, these will all be things that we will wait to see June 15th, what will happen when the state tiers go away, and then the follow-up for what the school guidance will look like. I think we've had some foreshadowing of what businesses will look like, but we know that they're going to give schools our own guidance as well. And so as soon as we get this information, as to what these rules may be, we will share with you. But as we've, we may get our first set and hints of those the week of June 15th, when many of the restrictions are to be lifted.
Next question, and we had a few different folks ask a very similar question. Can you please explain again what you mean by legislative action is needed to distance learning, but not HBIS?
Yes. So homeschooling, so the HBIS, the Home-Based Independent Study, is an independent study program. And right now, independent study is law. So for example, many of you may know that if you take a trip for 2 weeks, you can get put on an independent study contract with your child's teacher and principal. You then take the work, you do the work, you bring the work back, and then that short-term independent study contract is then ended. Independent study also has a long-term independent study. And so in this case, HBIS would fall under that, and it's for the entirety of a school year. In fact, the law requires that you re-up the contract on an annual basis. And so independent study, we are allowed to do. The distance learning that we did this year, we were able to do because the state of California gave us guidance that gave us additional flexibility. Although we had to stay in school for 180 days this year, the number of minutes in a day were greatly reduced. And so that's why the number of hours that your children were in school shifted this much. It was because the state provided that flexibility. They also provided flexibility for us to offer distance learning. And so that's what we did. They are still discussing whether or not to, I'm going to say, soften or give us additional independent study guidelines that will allow for more live instruction. The governor has indicated that he wants kids back in school. So our direction from the governor has been return kids to school. And so the independent study now is our way of offering you something for those of you that don't feel comfortable for your kids to attend school. The legislature, your elected, are then in discussions with the governor on how to come up with some permissions, if you will, that will allow us to provide some daily live interaction that we believe that we will be able to do. And so that we just don't have that guidance yet. Sometimes it comes out in something called trailer bill language, fancy word for they approve the budget, and then they come up and then they kind of give us what some of the rules for the budget, and some of those are those guidelines. So we would need our elected officials to, through an assembly bill or a Senate bill, provide us some additional flexibility with independent study. And so for right now though, so we can't overpromise. We don't know, we don't have permission for that. We do think though, because we have that online, our distance learning platform, that we can use that platform. That is an 100% online platform. But the distance learning piece of that is that we can provide some teaching support and some teaching instruction to go along with it. We do believe that we're going to be allowed to do that. We just want to be very transparent that we're waiting for additional guidance. They're in discussion with that for next year.
Next question. Are TUSD staff members required to get vaccinated? And are you encouraging parents to get vaccinated?
So I think I'm going to say we are encouraging everyone who at this point, is old enough to get vaccinated to go to be vaccinated. Herd immunity and everything that you hear in the news, and I don't want to overspeak, I'm not a medical professional, but we are encouraging everybody to be vaccinated. We don't have any plan though for it to be a requirement for students or for teachers. In fact, we're not allowed to ask. It's a HIPAA violation. That's that forms you sign every time you go to the doctor that says that they won't talk about to anybody else, your medical records. We aren't allowed to even know. Now we do know a lot because people, are forthcoming, but that's not information that we can share.
Next question. When students are back in school, what will snack time and lunch time look like?
Yeah, good question. And so the good news is we had many of our campuses that are very large, had a lot of students return. And even though, not elementary school, because we did AM or PM. And so we didn't have as many kids on campus at lunch. We had our special education and some specialty intervention and cohort groups. But we did have hundreds and hundreds of students on high school campuses since late March. And so, and they, at this time, You know, they are allowed to take off their mask when they're eating and drinking, but they sat in different, you know, locations 6 feet apart, because that was the current guidance, and then put their masks on when they weren't, you know, eating. Schools are looking at whether they have multiple lunch hours at the elementary level, so that there's enough room for students to spread out and be able to eat their lunch. And so it may be, if you are at a smaller elementary school and they've been able to have one lunch hour, they may split the students and have multiple lunch sessions until we are. But I know I sound like a broken record. See what the Department of Public Health says and provides us, you know, further guidance with.
Next question. Will older students need to bring their own devices like a Chromebook when they are back in person at school?
No, good question. No, we don't believe so. We do know that we're going to have some breakage of Chromebooks that we loaned out. You know, we loaned out quite a number of Chromebooks. And so as they get returned in the next few, you know, in a couple of weeks, we're inventorying and purchasing, you know, additional Chromebooks so that we have them in class when students need them.
Next question. Will there be some sort of break times for students in distance learning?
Well, that break time, of course, I'm sure that the schedule will be up to the teacher of how they give breaks. And I think in being in and out of many teachers' classrooms this year, you know, some of them had a timer that they got up that was like counting down 10 minutes so kids could get in and go run around, grab something to drink, you know, and come back, still kind of keep an eye on that timer so they didn't get distracted and forget to return to class. But yeah, they typically have very similar breaks as the regular in-person students.
Next question says, will students' sick leave affect their attendance? Perhaps they're asking how it's marked when a student is sick in distance learning.
Well, if they don't log on, then they're absent. And so them logging on and participating in their work, if they're distance learning, if they're too sick to be able to log on and do their work, then that would be an absence. In the HBIS program, that's governed a little differently, and it's by the work completion. And so I suppose if they're an HBIS student, as long as they get their work done, they could work that around, you know, any illness that they have.
Next question. What will be the rules for students attending school with cold symptoms?
Well, so again, you know, ahead of that guidance, we are anticipating that we will continue monitoring as students enter, whether that's, you know, if assuming that the majority of you on this call tonight do not have students that are in person, every day that a student comes, they have to do a screening and make sure that there's no, and they answer a few questions. You know, and to be honest with you, like a runny nose is not one of those symptoms. Most of that COVID related has to do with fever and the, you know, and the cough and exposure kind of questions. But we will take that lead to monitoring. I think if we've learned nothing from this year, and as I reiterate what Dr. Stowe said, the safety protocols that we put in place, and we didn't know, we were following the experts and you know, and brought our kids back to school. The fact that we have no known transmissions, that a teacher did not get sick from any COVID positive student, a student did not get sick from any COVID positive, you know, parent, and kids, and we had COVID kids. often siblings would come and we would be told the 2 siblings at a school have to quarantine. Never did another kid, a student or teacher in that class, come down with COVID. And so I think that we have learned that I'm hopeful beyond the COVID epidemic, that we've actually learned a lot of good hygiene to actually help us stay well and have kids be not contaminating each other with our safety protocols that we've learned. And I don't know, and we kind of giggle about having a crystal ball, but whether or not mask wearing becomes something that kids do when they do have cold symptoms, certainly the disinfecting that we're doing and the frequent hand washing that we're doing, I think, and some of the other protocols that we put in place are going to reduce post-COVID other illnesses as well.
Next question. Will a distance learning student with an IEP be able to receive services remotely as well?
So that's a great question about special education. You actually have to have an addendum. If your student is on an IEP and you want to be a distance learning student, you have to have an addendum to your IEP. So that team is making this determination. And so that question is the answer is perhaps, but not guaranteed. And it may be just depending on the different services that you have. So that answer is, if you are certain that you want your child to remain distance learning next year, and even with an IEP, and you go back to that first slide of, is this the right choice for my child? And you answered yes to those questions, then I would reach out to your child's teacher, their case carrier, and schedule that addendum so that you can discuss how those services and what those services are that can and how they would get handled. So that will be taken care of through the IEP process. That was an excellent question.
Next question. Will students need to bring their own supplies when going back to school? And will students be allowed to play with each other?
Yeah, so, and the answer is no. Students, we have learned a lot about cleanliness, but we've also learned that the COVID is not transmitted through touch very much, if at all. And all of these early things that we were doing, they are not as concerned. We know that it's way more coughing and airborne and not touch, especially on porous surfaces. So, but we have created for our teachers that have returned ways that kids have their own supplies, so they're not just digging in and so I said we've learned a lot about not just safe COVID return to school, but how do we actually have more sanitary conditions, for regular non-COVID related school as well. So they will not have to bring their own supplies. In fact, we supply everything. Some people like to bring supplies, but we supply all necessary materials, books, and supplies that your student needs for them to be in school. And Dr. Kim, I apologize. Was there a second part to that question?
I think you answered it.
Okay.
Okay, next question. How are the timelines between Cal OSHA updates and California reopening aligned with the TUSD date for a decision?
Can you read that again? I don't know that I can answer a Cal OSHA question because I'm the instructional person, but I can read that again, Edon, and let me see.
How are the timelines between Cal OSHA updates and California reopening aligned with the TUSD date for making a decision?
Oh, for making a decision. Got it.
I assume they
So
mean opting into distance or not.
right. And so, yeah, it's kind of like they're not necessarily aligned, but I'm not sure that any date that we would choose have a have an alignment, because they can make adjustments at any time. At this time, we need to plan this program. Our straw poll that Dr. Stowe talked about, our survey, had a very low percent of students that were considering distance learning, and how many students and at what grade level. We've got to know whether or not how many teachers will be distance learning teachers. We've got to give our teachers, before they leave for the summer, what grade levels they'll be teaching. We start professional development and learning and training literally the week after school gets out, with a big writer's workshop, we call it, but we have a big writing institute of training, and teachers need to know what grade level they're teaching so that they can go into these trainings and get the right professional development. And so this date has been backward mapped from, and it's going to be quick. We got a lot of work starting on June 2nd to be able to figure this out and determine classes and determine teachers and be able to let teachers know what they're doing before the end of the school year. That was how the timeline was aligned. And Edon, I'm going to say 2 more questions, because I did tell people and our translators, and thank you very much, that that this meeting was from 5 to 6 o'clock this evening. And so I'll take 2 more questions and then let people sign off.
Very good. Next question. We've signed up for distance learning on PowerSchool, but have not received any confirmations. How do we confirm?
So great question. Sometimes I think I've fed some of these parents these questions. So you will receive, our school principals are going to reach out to you before the last day of school. So you're not going to receive a confirmation in PowerSchool. PowerSchool is not set up to give you a receipt. But we are having each of our school principals reach out to our distance learning families and have a conversation or have a quick check-in. So you will be receiving something in between probably June 3rd and June 7th. Expect to receive a call, phone call from your child's principal confirming. And that reminds me, Dr. Kim, did you put the sign-in sheet in the chat? Or we don't have that?
Chat is not enabled.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you. All right, last question.
Okay, the last question is, for online learning, how many students will there be per grade level? But they may also mean per class.
Right, and so per class, and that kind of goes back to, we allocate on a 27-to-1 average. So there could be a class, but so I would say the average class size is 27-to-1. So the distance learning teacher will have 27. They could have 30, depending on the number of kids. If there's, as I said, the numbers were very low when we did our initial poll. There may be combination classes. There didn't seem to be a large enough number for entire classes at a grade level. But let's say that there's 31 fifth graders that want distance learning. We'll probably have one class of 31, and that will be a little high. But there also, chances are there's going to be combination classes because when we're looking and we're checking the numbers, they are very small. I think we had 6 kindergartens right at this time. And so we can't run a class with 6 students. So it would probably be a combination class. Won't know, but your principals will know when they reach out to you. Maybe not where your child will be placed, but they may know whether there's going to be a 5th grade class or 2 5th grade classes or a 5th grade and a 4 or 5 combo. We may know that by the end of next week. So did we get through the breadth of most of the questions, Dr. Kim? Is there a topic that remained uncovered with a few questions, or have we kind of handled most of the questions?
I do believe we've handled the majority, the vast majority of questions. There are some specific questions about sites that I would encourage those parents to reach out and email or call your school site principal for those specific questions. So there were questions about, I'll just say a couple schools like Lincoln Elementary. So I do suggest you actually reach out to the folks there at Lincoln, including the principal there with your site specific questions. I'd also encourage everyone on the May 18th letter from Dr. Stowe, it did include at the very bottom the link to this meeting, but as well as that, FAQs for both elementary and secondary. So if you click on that, many of the questions that remain are actually answered in the FAQs already. And if you're not sure where the email is, if you go to TUSD.org on the very first landing page, on the left side, there's news and information. The very first item there is that letter from May 18th from Dr. Stowe. So if you click on that and then scroll down, the FAQs are at the bottom of that as well.
And one of the reasons that we did this meeting tonight is that, you know, we sent the letter out last Tuesday after we received board direction last Monday night. And so it gave you time to plan to attend tonight. So thank you. But it also gives you a week. So before you have to make a final decision. And so that does give you, you know, the rest of this week to reach out to your child's site. You can send any of us an email. We'll try our best to answer any of your questions. I have one or two that have come in already, so people know where to find us. You know, we're happy if there's specific questions that didn't get answered. We're happy to. That's why we did this again, is to make sure that you had enough time to get your questions answered ahead of making that decision. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate all of our translators again, Dr. Heinrich, Dr. I'm like looking around, they've moved, Dr. Stowe, Dr. Kim, Gil for running this, for participating this evening. We appreciate all your time. Good evening.